September 2022 arrived with a quiet sense of inevitability inside the royal family. Publicly, life continued as it always had. Official schedules were followed, photographs were taken, and statements were issued. Behind palace walls, however, those closest to Queen Elizabeth II understood a reality that few wanted to speak aloud. At 96 years old, the monarch who had spent 7 decades serving her country was approaching the final chapter of her life. The signs were subtle, but impossible to ignore. Earlier that year, during the Platinum Jubilee celebrations, the Queen had appeared before the public with the determination and dignity people expected from her. Yet those who watched closely noticed the physical strain. Her movements were slower. She relied more heavily on support. Public appearances became increasingly limited as the months passed. At Balmoral, where she spent much of her time during her final summer, staff members observed the changes that accompany advanced age. There was nothing dramatic about it. Rather, it was the quiet transformation that occurs when a person who has lived an extraordinary life begins preparing, consciously or unconsciously, for what comes next. On September 6th, she fulfilled one of her final constitutional duties by receiving Britain's newly appointed Prime Minister. The photographs from that meeting would later become historic. Though she smiled warmly, there were visible signs of frailty. Her hands bore marks from medical treatments, and her frame appeared noticeably thinner than in previous years, yet her commitment to duty remained unchanged. The following day, Prince William made an unplanned journey north. No announcement was issued, no official explanation accompanied the visit. He simply felt compelled to go. Something told him that time was becoming precious. When he arrived at Balmoral, he was shown into the Queen's sitting room. The familiar space overlooked the Scottish landscape she had loved throughout her life. Sunlight filtered through the windows, casting a gentle glow across the room. The Queen sat in her favorite chair near the window. When William entered, she looked up and smiled. For a moment, he saw both the grandmother he had always known and the monarch who had shaped modern history. He sat opposite her. The conversation began casually, touching on family matters and recent events. Soon, however, it became more personal. The Queen spoke about Prince Philip. More than a year had passed since her husband's death, yet the loss remained profound. She described the strange loneliness that follows the absence of someone who had shared every stage of life for more than 7 decades. William listened carefully. The sadness in her voice was quiet but unmistakable. Eventually, the conversation shifted. The Queen looked directly at him. "You will become king sooner than you expect," she said. The statement hung in the air. William remained silent. She continued, "It isn't a warning. It's simply the truth." Then she began sharing advice that had taken a lifetime to learn. She explained that countless people would tell him how to fulfill the role. There would be endless discussions about tradition, ceremony, constitutional responsibilities, and public expectations. All of those things mattered. But there was another lesson few people talked about. The institution has a way of consuming the person inside it, she said quietly. William listened. The Queen explained that public duty could gradually replace individuality if a person allowed it. The role could become so large that it overshadowed everything else. "You must remember who you are outside the title," she told him. "Otherwise, something important disappears." William asked how a person could prevent that from happening. The Queen looked toward the window. For a moment, she seemed lost in thought. Then she gave an unexpected answer. "You find the things that remind you that you're human." A silence followed. Eventually, she mentioned Diana. The reference surprised him. The Queen rarely spoke about his mother in such personal terms. "She understood that better than most of us," the Queen said. There was a weight behind the words. Not regret exactly, perhaps recognition, perhaps respect. She did not elaborate immediately. Instead, she pointed toward a small wooden box resting on a nearby table. "Bring that to me," she said. William stood and carried it over. The box appeared ordinary. Its significance was hidden entirely within its contents. The Queen opened it carefully. Inside lay several items preserved over many years: letters written in Diana's handwriting, old photographs, a folded child's drawing made with crayons, and beneath everything else, a single sheet of paper containing a name and an address. William picked up one photograph. It showed Diana sitting beside a young girl in what appeared to be a hospital room. The image was completely natural. No cameras, no public event, no official purpose. His mother was leaning forward, speaking softly, while the child watched her with complete trust. He had never seen the photograph before. "Who is she?" he asked. The Queen looked at the picture. "A child your mother helped," she replied. Then she told him a story he had never heard. Years earlier, Diana had quietly visited the girl during a serious illness. The visits were private and repeated many times. She paid for treatments, sent letters, and provided support without ever seeking publicity. Almost nobody knew. The Queen explained that the box had been discovered among Diana's belongings after her death. She had kept it ever since. Then she handed William the paper containing the address. "That's where she lives now," she said. William looked puzzled. "Why are you showing me this?" The Queen's answer was simple. "Because your mother would have wanted you to know." She paused. "Go and see her." William stared at the box for a long moment. He still did not fully understand, but he sensed that the request mattered deeply. Before leaving, he kissed his grandmother on the cheek. She squeezed his hand gently. Neither realized it would be their final private conversation. As William walked out carrying the box, he felt the weight of something larger than memories. He simply didn't know yet how far that story would reach, or how much it would change his understanding of both his mother and his grandmother forever. The morning after leaving Balmoral, Prince William woke with the wooden box still occupying his thoughts. The previous evening's conversation with the Queen had raised more questions than answers. He had spent hours examining the photographs and letters stored inside, trying to piece together a story that had remained hidden throughout most of his life. One image continued returning to his mind. It showed Princess Diana sitting beside a young girl in a hospital room. There were no reporters, no photographers, and no indication that the visit had ever been intended for public knowledge. The photograph captured something authentic. His mother appeared relaxed, focused entirely on the child beside her. The expression on the girl's face was equally striking. It was the look of someone who felt safe. William found himself wondering how many other moments like that had existed beyond public view. The next morning, he set out to find answers. Using the address the Queen had given him, he drove south toward a small town in northern England. The journey was quiet. He informed only a limited number of people about where he was going. There would be no official announcement and no media presence. The destination turned out to be an ordinary street, lined with modest homes and local businesses. Nothing about the area suggested importance or significance. Yet somewhere nearby lived a woman connected to a chapter of Diana's life that William had never known existed. At the end of the road stood a small medical clinic. Its appearance was simple and welcoming. Through the windows, he could see patients waiting in plastic chairs, families talking quietly, and staff moving between rooms. It looked like the kind of place people visited when they needed help and reassurance. William paused outside before entering. Inside, a receptionist greeted him politely. He provided the name written on the paper. The woman looked surprised but remained professional. She made a brief telephone call and then informed him that someone would be with him shortly. As he waited, he studied the room. Photographs decorated the walls. Letters of gratitude were displayed in frames. One sign in particular caught his attention. "Everyone who enters here matters." The message was simple, yet it reflected the atmosphere of the clinic perfectly. A few moments later, a woman emerged from a hallway. She appeared to be in her late 30s and was clearly in the middle of a busy workday. Her identification badge suggested she played an important role within the organization. When she saw William, she stopped abruptly. For a second, she seemed unsure whether to trust what she was seeing. Then recognition appeared. "Your Royal Highness," she said softly. William smiled. "I'm sorry for arriving without warning." The woman introduced herself as Emma. When he explained that the Queen had provided her address, confusion crossed her face. "The Queen knew where I lived?" she asked. William nodded. Emma invited him into a small office at the rear of the building. Once seated, she began telling him a story he had never heard before. She explained that she had been only 6 years old when Princess Diana first entered her life. At the time, she was suffering from a serious illness. Her family faced enormous financial difficulties, and treatment options were becoming increasingly limited. They had written letters seeking help from various organizations. Most went unanswered. Then something unexpected happened. One afternoon, Diana appeared. No cameras accompanied her. No journalists followed. She arrived simply because she wanted to help. Emma described how Diana sat beside her, spoke to her like an ordinary child, and returned repeatedly over the following years. She brought books, small gifts, words of encouragement. Most importantly, she ensured that medical treatment continued when the family could no longer afford it. William listened in silence. Each detail revealed a side of his mother that remained invisible to the public. Emma explained that Diana never tried to draw attention to her generosity. She never transformed the relationship into a public campaign or charitable announcement. She simply showed up, again and again. Then came the tragedy of 1997. When Diana died, Emma was only 8 years old. The loss devastated her. She remembered feeling confused and heartbroken. The person who had brought hope into her life was suddenly gone. Yet something unexpected happened afterward. The support continued. Bills were still paid. Educational opportunities remained available. Financial assistance arrived when needed. Year after year, someone ensured she had what was necessary to build a future. For decades, Emma never discovered who was responsible. Her family assumed the help came from a charitable foundation connected to Diana's legacy. The truth was something else entirely. As William listened, he remembered the Queen's words. "I made sure she was taken care of." Only now did he fully understand. His grandmother had quietly continued Diana's work. For 25 years. Without recognition, without publicity, without telling anyone, the realization left him speechless. He asked Emma what inspired her to establish the clinic. Her answer was immediate. She thought about what might have happened had Diana never appeared in her life. Without that intervention, her future could have been very different. Eventually, she realized there were countless children and families facing similar struggles. People who felt forgotten. People who had nowhere to turn. She wanted to become the person who showed up for them, so she opened the clinic. Over time, it grew into an essential community resource. Hundreds of patients received assistance every month. Many were individuals who had fallen through gaps in existing systems. The clinic existed because one act of kindness had inspired another, and another, and another. William sat quietly, absorbing the magnitude of what he had learned. His mother's compassion had changed a child's life. His grandmother's dedication had preserved that opportunity long after Diana was gone. Together, their actions had created something lasting. Before he left, Emma hesitated. Then she admitted there was something she had always wished she could say. She never had the chance to thank Diana personally. She wanted William to know how much those visits had meant. The words carried genuine emotion. William smiled. "I think she would have been very happy to hear that," he replied. As he drove back toward Scotland later that day, he felt eager to share the story with the Queen. He wanted to tell her about Emma, about the clinic, about the hundreds of lives being helped because of choices made decades earlier. But before he could return, his phone rang. The news came quietly. The Queen had passed away peacefully. William pulled to the side of the road. For a long time, he simply sat there. His final conversation with her replayed in his mind. The wooden box, the photograph, the address, the request. Only now did he fully understand the gift she had given him. When he eventually returned to Balmoral, the sitting room felt unchanged and entirely different at the same time. The chair by the window stood empty. The silence carried a new meaning. Looking back, William realized something important. The people closest to us are often far more complex than we imagine. The world knew Diana as a princess. The world knew Elizabeth as a queen. Yet hidden beneath those public identities were acts of kindness, sacrifice, and generosity that few people ever witnessed. The wooden box remained with him, not because of its contents alone, but because it reminded him that true character is often revealed not by what people do in public, but by what they choose to do when nobody is watching. And that lesson stayed with him long after that extraordinary week came to an end.